Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We are now being joined by two persons who played a prominent role at yesterday's RevolutionNow Symposium in Lagos, which was almost marred by the intervention of the police and other security agencies. They are Gbenga Komolafe, who was a keynote speaker at the event, and Lanre Legacy, the event organizer. Gentlemen, welcome to the morning show.
Welcome to the morning show.
Yes, it's good to have you here. Well, Lanre, let me start with you. What exactly transpired yesterday?
Well, it's an obvious rape on democracy because wanting to have a national discourse, talking about issues that are affecting us all, and the police would lock up private residents, would not allow people to converge, sit down, and talk, shows how far the level of tyranny is being pushed by this present government. And I think we all must stand up for that. We fought this days back during the military era. And being in democracy, one would have thought that we all should enjoy that privilege. That right to talk is essential.
Yeah, but it looks like the situation was eventually managed. And the police, they just stood by. And the event still, proceeded as planned.
Well,
how did you get to that point?
Well, it took the intervention of senior comrades, including the respected senior advocate of Nigeria, Chief Mr. Femi Falana, to intervene with some of us, and we had to engage them. They had to call the CP, on whose order they were asked to restrain people from getting to their premises. After a series of engagements, they eventually allowed us to go in. But sincerely speaking, I was almost moved to tears. It doesn't have to get to that level. People have to be screened before they could get into private residence to talk. What kind of democracy are we talking about?
It's a very worrying situation, which is why I'd like to ask you about this. Let's go back to the grassroots of this movement, Revolution Now. It seems as though the word revolution became a swear word to the government, and they acted based off that word, which is why they detained Omoyele Sowore, etc. What is your take on everything that has happened? What is your take on the way the government has responded to what was supposed to be one's right to peaceful protests?
Yeah, like Lanre said, I think it's actually a tragedy to have to undergo that kind of experience. It was bad enough that they wouldn't allow a protest to happen on August 5 because we also tenaciously hold to our right to peaceful protest. But it's even more incredible that to have a situation where people will not be allowed to peacefully gather together to talk about anything. Revolution may get some people a little bit, uncomfortable. But the truth is that there really nothing much to that word. I would rather have people talk about revolution, which to me simply means a change from a certain kind of situation to another, than to have a Boko Haram blowing up bombs here and there. So I think whatever name we call it, however we term it, the point is that people have a right to engage with their government if they feel aggrieved about anything, more so in a so-called democracy. We all also know the general situation in the country right now. And I think 20 years since, 1999, we've embarked on this so-called democratic journey. I think 20 years after is right time to begin to ask questions.
Well, still on the phrase revolution, the government's interpretation of it is quite different. The government assumes that when you talk about revolution now, what you are saying invariably is that you want to cause public disturbance, you want to overwhelm the government of the day, and Sowore, the leader of the movement, of the protest, has been quoted as saying that he will set himself ablaze and that the youths of Nigeria would take back, the government. And that was given a lot of interpretations. And then, of course, when the Department of State Security Services went to court to get a detention order, an extension of detention for additional 45 days, they did so, quoting the Terrorism Prevention Amendment Act, more or less giving a suggestion that this is a band of terrorists. So are you guys terrorists, or you have certain minimum demands? And if you do, Maybe you want to articulate those demands for the benefit of our viewers.
Yeah, I think tagging the Revolution Now affair as terrorism is simply being melodramatic about a very simple civic, affair going on here, which is about citizens asking questions why things are the way they are. The educational sector is in shambles. Right now, the unions in the educational sector are preparing for another strike. I've lost count of the number of strikes we have had in that sector. The health sector is in shambles, and that is evident by the fact that leading figures in the government themselves go abroad to treat even headache and toothaches. Nothing is virtually working. We're graduating hundreds of thousands of young people into the streets every day, no jobs, no nothing. And the least we could do is to ask for a change. And that's what I think the Revolution Now business is about. Like somebody said, it's not really what you call a movement that matters. I think it's the content and the demands of that movement that should really concern all of us. And what are we asking about here? People are saying, put Nigerian young people back to work. I mean, almost 60% of us have nothing really productive doing. That's the truth. The employment situation in this country right now is simply unacceptable. We talk about education, we talk about healthcare. We have one of the lowest budgetary allocations to these vital sectors. As up to the 80s, the rest of the world used to come to UCH in Ibadan for treatment. Now the whole place is just what it is. So we can't continue like this. Not all of us can go abroad to treat toothache. Most of us have to remain here. And we cannot sit down and just be watching while the whole country goes to the drain. We're talking of 30,000 naira minimum wage. And it's taking years to even get to that point of endless negotiations. Now, they have agreed to 30,000. It's not being implemented. And there's no indication whatsoever of any willingness to implement this.
These are very...
So these are some of the very simple demands that the movement is talking about. And I also need to say this, that apart from the Revolution Now movement, which has revolved around the person of Omoyele Sowore, there are also other groups and organizations that are coming up to say the Revolution Now signal is actually a clarion call for all of us to begin to get up to demand for accountability.
Absolutely. And these are very worrying issues that you mentioned. They're real issues. It's exactly what we're facing in Nigeria today. And as citizens, we have the right to stand up for these things. Lanre, let me ask you a question. Your Sowore has been detained for a certain number of days now. And the DSS's order, or request rather, was approved by the courts. And this is not necessarily a nice situation for us to be looking at, because we know that the repercussions of this could be quite grave, could be quite serious. What is your take on this detainment of Sowore, and what is the latest? Do we have any updates on that situation?
Well, you can see from the judgment, say renewable, 45 days, which means that we're just going back to a situation of anarchy. Governments trying to infringe on people's rights. If the DSS had sufficient evidence in the first instance to have nailed or picked him, one would have expected that they should go straight into trial, which is not what they are doing right now. But like you rightly said earlier on, that perhaps because he wants to burn himself alive, perhaps because the government is trying to save his life. Sincerely speaking, I found that as being funny. Because in the first instance, look at the level of maternal mortality in Nigeria. 1 out of every 13 ladies would die, either during pregnancy or during childbirth.
Highest rates in the world.
Highest rates in the world. Look at the level of poverty. Look at the level of Nigerians that are fleeing the country just because the situation, in fact itself, is burning them. And they are running to countries where they are being burnt alive. Can you understand what I'm saying? Now, when you look at all that, and the government is telling me because people are now... I would have thought that the best thing to have been discussing by now is that what are the real issues? What are the demands of CORE? How do we sit down to at least solve all these problems? Those are the things we should be talking about. But detaining him doesn't solve the problem. It further aggravates it. And you can see right now a lot of persons are coming up. I don't know how many persons would have to be arrested over this. But the sincere truth is that we have to sit down and solve the problem. Look at what is coming up from the FIRS. In 2016 to 2018, when we were talking about recession, we had a situation where there is fall in the price of crude. And the only thing they reverted to was to increase income generation from non-oil revenue, which means that the ruling elite is further causing problem for the masses. While we're suffering, they didn't reduce money being paid to government agencies, tackles, and what have you. National Assembly persons did not reduce their wages and salaries. Even as of today, they are giving them 5.5 billion naira for the senators to acquire SUV outside the shores of the country. They're the one bleeding this country. They're the one taking the money out and making poverty, endemic in the system. So fundamentally, I think to me, it's just like trying to rub things on our nose. We should all rise up and begin to ask for the basic rights. Look, this country as of today, whether we like it or not, the number of persons that are dying, children out of school, 1 out of every 5 all over the world is in Nigeria. It means that in some few years, we'll be harvesting criminals that we potentially built on our own. And we'll not start having to look for securities to solve this problem. Why are we wasting all this? Look at the level of brain drain. Persons getting educated and traveling outside the shores of Nigeria, not wanting to come back. We're wasting resources. We are putting ourselves in a state of quagmire, and we have to rise up to talk about all this. This is what we are doing.
Well, it's good. It's good you've talked about Showore and you've explained what your demands and expectations are. But, in the course of the demonstrations on August 5, right? Other members of your movement were arrested across the country. I think we had a total of about 56, and many of these persons have been taken to magistrate court. What is the situation with those persons? Have they all been granted bail? And do you have a system in place for following up, for organizing legal defense for them? But before you answer that, we'll take a short break, and then when we return, you can address the question. We'll take a short break now. We'll be right back. Stay. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Still with us in the studio are 2 leaders of the Coalition for Revolution in Nigeria, Lanre Adeleke and Gbenga Komolafe. Gentlemen, before we went on break, I asked you a question about the plight, the fate, the situation with the 56 other persons who were arrested by the Nigerian police after or on August 5 during the demonstrations. What is the situation with them? Have they been freed? Or the cases are still going on in court across the country?
Cases are going on in court. For some of them, they were given administrative bail by the police. But we still have one of them that is still being detained in Osogbo by the DSS. Till today, we've not been even given access to talk to him. That's how bad it is. We're talking about almost 14 days now. I'm talking about Mandate, a young man called Mandate. And that's how bad the situation is. All other persons, we're going on with the cases in court. Some other persons given administrative bail. But apart from Showore, we still have one other person being detained by the DSS in Osogbo. Until today, no access to him.
The report that we have here in this day, following yesterday's event, there's a part of this report where Femi Falana SAN says, I was informed that about 3 people were arrested this morning, and I'll make sure they're released unconditionally. So I take it then another 3 people were then arrested.
That was for yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday morning, another 3 people were arrested. So the arrests keep going on and keep going on. What exactly is the way forward here?
Yeah, well, yesterday some people were initially picked up, and I think after the vigorous interventions of Femi Falana and other leading members of the movement, they were eventually released. But like Lanre said, we still have the young chap in Osogbo, and of course we still have Showore in detention. And of course, as long as these guys are there, it's an open indictment on this government that will have this kind of situation, because even under the military, even under the soldiers, I led 11 demonstrations as a student union leader in the late 1980s. And not once were people detained without being released in record time or at least being charged to court. I was actually detained myself. We eventually landed in court. The court ordered our release, and we were released by the military. And now we have a so-called democracy, and people have been picked up, and you will not even charge them to court. Of course, we will not accept this kind of situation. And if they will have to pick up the rest of us, let them go ahead, because we fought for this, and we're not going to sleep while they roll back what we paid so much to achieve. The important message really is to Nigerians, to the rest of us in this country, that we shouldn't go to sleep. It happened to Ezagizaki, where we are not Shiite, we are not, most people didn't bother. It happened to this, it happened to that. Individuals have been picked at various times by this government, and people just felt it didn't concern them. And now it's moving into the realms of the civil liberty movement. People are now being picked for exercising most basic civic rights, the right to assembly, the right to peaceful protest. You know, a lot has been said about revolution. But the truth is that President Buhari himself has openly called for revolution, you know, when he was in the opposition. And nobody arrested him, nobody detained him without trial. So the least we can ask for, even in the absence of basic socio-economic rights, to education, to health care, to electricity, and all those basic things that make for a modern society, is that at least we should be, our rights to basic civil liberty should be respected. And we'll do everything to protect our rights.
Well, you say you do everything, but how strong is your resolve? Because when this started on August 5, and you had that protest, and the protesters were attacked by policemen and soldiers, after that, the protest has not really gained traction. And yesterday, what happened was that you moved from the streets, you moved into a hall. And even in that hall, the police were there waiting for you. I asked a question about the strength of your resolve in the light of, what is going on in Hong Kong, where for about 12 weeks, you have people trooping out onto the streets, millions of them. In the light of what we have seen in Algeria, in the light of what we have seen in Sudan, and all of this may be the basis for government's anxiety and concern. But where do you think all of this is going? Because I don't quite see that traction.
Well, it's a process. For almost 20 years now, Nigerians have bought the boogie that we have a democracy, and that with that, there will be development. Because democracy without development is hollow. As a matter of fact, you will want to question the validity to the claim to be a democratic country when the most basic ingredients, especially in the realm of socio-economic rights, and now even in the realm of basic civil liberties, are not there. So gradually, people are waking up to the reality that this democracy is not working for overwhelming majority of Nigerians. People talk of 99%. I'm sure if you work out the mathematics, even 99.99% of Nigerians cannot claim to have their interests represented by what we call democracy right now in this country. And that's why some people have been beaten up even outside the country. People are venting their frustration and disappointment at the ruling elite. You have a situation whereby people are earning humongous amount of salaries and emoluments, and they cannot pay 30,000 minimum wage. So the awakening, even the organized labor have been giving their own warnings. Nobody is paying attention, So the various segments of society have had, ASU, the academic unions are on strike right now. So the awakening is gradual, but it's coming up. Hong Kong didn't happen overnight. All the other instances we have mentioned follow the process, you know. We know the role of individuals and organizations, even in some of these other countries we have mentioned. What we are simply saying here also is that this is not about an individual called Omoyele Sowore, or me, or him, or a few other names you might be familiar with. This is about the aspiration of our people for genuine development. And except something, and very fast to happen, to reverse the downward plunge of this country into the abyss by the ruling elite, we haven't started yet.
That's revolutionary language.
Let me add words to that.
And while you're adding words to that as well, tell us about the Coalition for Revolution. So do you think there's anything that the coalition could have done differently in the way they've gone about all of these events? Or do you think that really and truly you guys just did what you know how to do, by your rights, and the government is wrong in all ways?
You know, sincerely speaking, you're talking about the resolve, how determined we are. What is happening in Nigeria as of today? Perhaps some other persons can't see the way we're seeing it. We're sitting on a keg of gunpowder. Anytime it could blow to our face. Already we've seen insurgency in the northeast. We've seen kidnapping even in the south every day. Sincerely speaking, we might get to a situation where anarchy will be the order of the day. And that's exactly what we're trying to prevent. When we say revolution, it doesn't really mean that we just want to take over government. We want a change in the social disorderliness that we have presently. And it involves re-engaging people. It's not just going to the streets all the time alone. We will definitely engage the government on the street again. Shortly, we will. Because we won't keep on watching people dying at home, not having access to basic health, people not having access to education, people not having even opportunity to collect the minimum wage we fought for, and keep on looking. Look, there's systemic corruption in Nigeria, and that's what I try to make emphasis on. They are the one draining this country and putting us in poverty. And as long as we don't change that, we will continue to remain the poverty capital of the world.
Lanre, I see a paradox here. Earlier this year, Nigerians had the opportunity to change government if they wanted to through the ballot box, okay? But at the end of the day, what we have found is that, you know, the ruling party was again more or less endorsed at the federal level. Now, most of the voters, Nigeria being, you know, a young population, were young people. The same people who are now protesting. But during that election, you know, young people, you know, didn't quite make the kind of statement that they ought to have made. And now after the election, we're talking about revolution. Are we not putting the cart before the horse?
I disagree totally with you on that. Is this the kind of election we're talking about? You saw what happened in Lagos, where people were being chased with guns. It happened in other states of the Federation. You saw the level of apathy. You saw how they deliberately put that into the mind of the people so that they wouldn't come out to vote. Is that the kind of election we're talking about?
Well,
and I think it would be a big blunder for us to think that kind of election, if we don't stand up to put people on check and fight for our rights, that kind of election will usher in anything meaningful to the development of this country. But I think
what Doctor is also saying is the resilience of young people. If 53.11% of accredited voters were considered to be youth, where is the resilience that we want to see? I'm saying this as a youth. Where is that resilience that we want to see? Look at Hong Kong, 11 weeks of straight protests, non-stop, back-to-back. That is resilience. Where is that level of resilience? Or is it that just before we get there, with a protest like Revolution Now, we are detained?
I've said it. Revolution Now is the beginning of a process. The last election is a demonstration of what people have observed over time, that the Nigerian democratic process, especially the electoral system, was evolving into a plutocracy, and that it was being divulged of every democratic content. We are now having a situation that if you are not a billionaire, a multi-billionaire, you cannot run for any election in this part of the world. Now, let's look at it. You talk of the last election. The first point you will notice is that most people...
Lanre and Gbenga, I think we'll have to pull the plug on this. I know we can continue for the next 1 hour, but maybe we'll invite you again.
Just one statement before we leave. The electoral process has been rigged against the Nigerian people.
That note.